Hello, welcome back. Today I want to show some of the last few steps before I can finally start assembling these two pads. I don't have footage for quite everything. I finished getting all of my sensor brackets installed in the proper positions. All of the sensor brackets themselves are mated in pairs now with the pieces of the frame that they attach to. So those are all done. What I'm doing here is marking out the places I need to recut those back cover plates, since I found out my handle joint brackets were actually built slightly differently than I expected. The outer pieces were salvageable because the posts were wider than I thought, so I can just trim a little bit off of those, but the inner ones will have to be recut and redone. One thing this does mean is that I'll have two different metal materials in the back, because those pieces were cut out of the sheet of aluminum that I bought by accident. That's okay, it doesn't bother me too much. If I were doing this again, I'd make sure I had steel for everything, but it'll be fine with a little bit of aluminum. The problem with aluminum, as I mentioned before, was that it actually corrodes fairly quickly, at least the stuff that I got, if it comes in contact with sweat. Now the stuff at the back of the pad is much less likely to get sweat dripped all over it than at the front, so this shouldn't be as much of a problem. And it's at the back, so it's kind of out of the way, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem if it gets a little bit of a blemish on it. So if you blinked, you missed me cutting that. Also need to cut out the corners just a little bit more. And those are adjusted. And of course I want to work on them with a file again. I'm actually using a file this time instead of the rasp, which wasn't as good a tool. File works much better. So here's a new sheet of steel that I bought to replace the other one that I used up. I'm cutting out the center pieces here, or what will become them. I still have a little bit of work yet to do on those. I need to actually drill the holes in them and trim them all the way down so that they'll be the appropriate size, but I have them all marked and ready to do that. That can just kind of happen at any time. It's just redoing the same thing that I did before. So that's where I'm going to cut, and that mark there is where I'm going to drill a circular hole. There's enough extra metal on the sides so that I can just drill it, then trim off the excess and have no problem. And that's those recut. So now for these wire harnesses, I went and got a much better crimping tool from them. I actually bought two of them. The first one I bought did not fit the pins at all. I apparently wasn't as careful as I should have been when ordering it. This one came directly from DigiKey, which is the company where I ordered the pins and connectors and everything. They have a super cool website. It lists a huge amount of stuff, so it's kind of hard to find the exact thing that I'm looking for if I know what I'm looking for. But they have a really large inventory of little tiny electronic components like this, and it's reasonably searchable. Yeah, I'm very pleased with the experience of working with them. So they have a tool on there. I'm saving the URLs of every item that I've bought from anywhere. And I just went back to the saved URL for those pins, looked at the page, and they listed the appropriate tool to use for working with them. So I just ordered one of those. It was a little pricey, so $50 for that thing that I'm holding in my right hand now, you know, which isn't too bad. And it really made a night and day difference for this. Like, doing this with needle nose pliers was just miserable. Doing it with this thing, highly enjoyable. Just goes quick, no problem. Just insert one place, squeeze, insert in the other place, squeeze, and then you're basically done and ready to insert into connector housing. So I've finished making all of these wire harnesses now. They still need one more connector each when they actually go into the pad. And you'll see some other stuff I do to prepare for that a little bit later. But yeah, same process here. Just twist the two wires together. Crimp the first little, I don't know what you call it, thing. I will call it a thing. Crimp the other one, then goes over the insulated wire. Pin's done. Insert. Listen for the click. 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 Connect sensors. Attach voltmeter. And test. It works. So right, all those are made, they're all tested, they all work, they all have 3 connectors each, 4th connector will be attached when they put in the pad. So another little task that I needed to do was for all these stationary panels that have had metal wrapped around them, I needed to countersink all of the screw holes because wood screws will be attaching there, and those have flat heads with sort of an inward angle on the bottom of them. So with this countersink drill bit, I just make sort of an inverted cone-shaped hole. It is a little bit hard to gauge the depth, so I'm using that thing there that I mentioned a little bit ago. So that's a drill guide attachment. It has a depth stop on it, which is supposed to be set just exactly to countersink to the amount that I need, but it didn't work perfectly. I didn't have an exactly level surface there, and the depth stop didn't seem super reliable either. Like, sometimes it would go a little past, sometimes it would stop it too early. A lot of that is because my surface wasn't totally level. The reason I have 4 of those around there is to provide a roughly level surface so that that thing can sit on it, but it didn't work super well. I ended up just having to pretty much eyeball the all the stuff there. I have a wood screw over on the right that I'm using to check the size of my hole. I can put it in upside down, and if the head sits inside it just a tiny little bit, then it's at the right depth. I could put it in all the way, which I will do in a little bit, but that just takes longer. So this panel that I'm working with right here, that I'm drilling into, is actually one that I won't be using, or the metal on it at least is. I wanted to do this for practice, just to be sure I knew what I was doing before I ruined any of the others. So that's one of the panels that's wrapped in aluminum. I mentioned before that I just bought the wrong kind of metal, didn't realize it until I had wrapped the thing. So after having done this and gotten some practice on it, I knew what I was doing. I rewrapped both of the aluminum panels in steel and countersunk them as well, so that's all done. For one of these holes, I did manage to go a little bit too far, so the screw head actually just goes right through the metal. Since it's such thin metal, that's very easy to do if by accident. So I try to go just a little short of where I need to be, check with the screw, go a tiny bit more, recheck with the screw, just do it in small increments until so that I don't go past where it needs to be. So I'm going to actually put the screw in here to show how it fits. So I think that won't be too much of a problem. I can stuff a little bit of material in between the screw head and the metal if necessary, or maybe it'll just happen to hold itself. Like I can put that panel and that screw way at the back where it won't be a problem if it doesn't hold quite perfectly. But I probably will put something in there just so that it holds a little bit better. I mean, it doesn't have to be much, just like a tiny little piece of paper or something would probably be enough to give it enough friction. So with countersinking, that sits nice and flat. Camera's having trouble focusing. You can see the hole's not quite straight, but that's not really going to be a problem. It would have been straight if I had used that guide attachment to drill it, but I didn't have it at the point that I was drilling those. So this panel that I'm working with here is one of the real ones. This is wrapped in steel, so I'm doing this for real now. I know what I'm doing mostly. Did still make a mistake with one or two, but yeah. Clear off all the little metal shavings, rotate it, do the next one. I stop after a little bit, lift it up just a bit to eyeball the hole. I have the one sort of right next to it that's countersunk perfectly, so I have a visual reference for how big I want the hole to be, and it wasn't too hard to eyeball. Needed just a tiny bit more so the screw would fit better. And then it's satisfactory. So when countersinking, things get kind of extremely hot. Like, I'm not working with a very thick piece of metal here, so it's not too bad, but I need to be careful. Careful not to touch the countersink bit or the metal too soon after doing this. So a lot of people who have arcade pads actually countersink the corner brackets in addition to these stationary panels. I thought about doing that, but unfortunately the screw holes don't quite line up perfectly with the machined parts that go under them. At least not all of them do. So I don't think that's going to be an option for me. But I've bought some screws that are a lot flatter than the round head DDR screws that came with the triangle brackets that I bought. So it should be okay. The screws that I got are very similar to Pump It Up or In the Groove screws. They were a little hard to find, but eventually I found the appropriate part. If I care enough, I might find a way to countersink those if the screws that I bought are not flat enough, but that remains to be seen, and that's a thing that can happen later if necessary. So I had 10 of these panels to do, 4 holes in each. And then I did, I think, both of my aluminum ones for practice. So I did this 50 times, basically. It wasn't too bad. It went reasonably quickly. Just was a bit of a process I had to sit down and do. So the depth stop there is kind of getting in my way a little bit. This is one of the situations where the thing just would not go down as far as I wanted it to go. I finally just pressed really hard, decided it was good enough. I'm glad I had it. It was better than nothing, but it wasn't as effective as it could have been. It's close to my hand that's holding the guide attachment. I'm covering it now. But yeah, it's just that thing on the side with the knob that screws into it. It just stops the rest from going all the way down. You'll see the drill guide attachment later being operated without the depth stop, which is a little bit different. Alright, so those are all done. So now another important thing that I need to do before I assemble is to cut some sort of holes into these things for wires to run through. So I'm marking all the positions where wires need to go. The holes don't need to be particularly huge. From the upper inner corners of each of the pads, I need to run to all 4 of the arrows, and through each hole will have up to 6 22 gauge wires running through it. So there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places where I need to drill holes, and they're done in pairs, so 6 pairs of frame pieces where holes need to go through. So there's the first one marked. And another. So I'm making a little mark right on the top there, 7.25 inches from the next, from the far edge, so that I have just enough space for the holes to go in and move the wires around a little bit. But I want it kind of as out of the way as possible to still be convenient. So then I turn the ruler vertically and make a line upward to match the one on top, because I'm going to be drilling into sort of the side of those. I was in an awkward position, but I managed to make all the marks the way they needed to be. So now I'm actually drilling the wire holes. It's a little hard to see, but I have made a mark there where the drill goes. Get a few taps to get the drill bit started. It's very close to the edge of the 2x3. So I try to do some fancy clamp stuff and have a couple of extra bits of wood to make a level surface so that I can drill into it with this thing. So the guide attachment here acts to drill a straight hole. So what I did there was I drilled all the way through one 2x3. There are two clamped on top of each other there with that this thing that I'm taking off now. So I've gone all the way through one and partially through the other one. The drill bit is not long enough to go into my floor, so I don't have to worry about that. But I've made the start of a hole in the second one. You can see that hole goes all the way through. Yeah, second one has the start of a hole which has to be drilled all the way through. So I just stick a piece of scrap wood on the bottom so I have something to drill into. And I don't, not that scrap wood, I choose a different one. I don't bother clamping it down for the second part of this because the hole itself kind of guides the drill downward. So I could just freehand that part, but it's kind of a pain to detach the drill from the guide attachment. The guide actually has its own chuck, which the drill bit is mounted to, so the drill is mounted to another part of it. So switching between the two isn't a super quick process. And when operating it without the depth stop, there are springs on the sides, so it sort of gives the drill a little bit of upward resistance. It just helps keep things a little more stable. So that hole's all the way through. All of these holes needed a little bit of cleanup after I had drilled them, so I just hit them a little bit with sandpaper and a file just to make the holes nice and round without any extra stuff kicked up around the sides of them. So those are going to need to line up when this is in the frame. I did my best to align the pieces of wood as they would be outside the frame and just clamp them down that way. That's what the clamp was for. And I think it worked for all of them. I guess it remains to be seen whether the holes will still go through when this is fully assembled. If they don't exactly, they should enough. I'm using a 1/4-inch drill bit, which seemed large enough for the size of the bundles of wires I needed to put through. I'm putting just 2 through with the one of my wire harnesses, just to make sure it works, and it does. So those two line up just fine. So each pad has 3 pairs of short pieces and 2 pairs of long pieces that get holes drilled in them, and 1 pair of long pieces, like the ones I just did, gets 2 holes. So I'm doing 2 of the shorter pieces here. It's easy to get kind of mixed up with what's where. I wasn't quite sure what was going on there, so I needed to go to the other room, check where those fit in the pad in my test assembly, and come back when I knew what was going on. So I had to carefully keep those in pairs for where the drilled holes were. The pieces of the frame were fairly generic up until this point, but now that I've put the sensor bracket inserts in them and drilled these holes, they actually become very specific. Like certain pieces are specific to the player 1 or player 2 pad, and a lot of them need to go in a very particular spot. So I'm basically like really close to the point where I'm ready to assemble stuff. I'm trying to get all the last little bits of things I need to do before assembling done. And I think next time is going to be actually mounting all these pieces of the frame to the base plate. And after that gets reasonably close to the end of the project. There's a bunch of stuff that needs to be mounted onto the frame, of course. But yeah, we'll get there when we get there. So I clamped those 2 together. This was the first pair of these short pieces that I did, so I was figuring this out as I went along. I have a bunch of extra 2x3s there that I can just kind of put in some sort of arrangement. Because I'm drilling into kind of a corner of those, I need extra ones around the edges to make a level surface for the drill guide attachment. And that's not really sitting level right now. If you watch the left side of that clamp, you can see it's moving up and down because the clamp is heavy on that side and it's sort of leaning it over. In order to fix that, I put a couple of thin pieces of wood up to prop it like that. So this process worked fine for me for the rest of these that I needed to do. It's just a little bit fiddly to get it worked out first. Even after lubricating the guides on that attachment, it is a little awkward to get it to move up and down. Have to push it down, see where I am, readjust, push it down again. But it works eventually. It does certainly help me for drilling straight down, but things do wobble around still quite a bit. More clamps might help. I didn't have a lot of clamps that were of the appropriate size for putting these together. That big one is pretty much the only one I had that would fit. But it did the job. Sawdust all over my floor. After each one of these, there's a kind of, not super lengthy, but slightly annoying cleanup process. I'm basically sitting just like right in front of my front door because it was the only decently sized floor space that I had open for this. Would be nice to have a better workshop, but I just don't have the space for it. So drilling all the way through the second hole now. When the drill bit goes through, I can feel the piece that I'm drilling through sort of pop up a little bit, so that's how I know when I'm done. Needed some cleanup there, but I do that later. A little bit of confusion here while I figure out what needs to match up to what. Because like one of those has sensor bracket inserts in it. Then the other one has the hole that matches somewhere or another. And finally I figure it out. The rest of them I'm a little bit more careful about keeping together in a mated pair. Wires go through just fine, no problem. All the holes work for what they need to do. And I've since reassembled this and verified that the holes still go through after everything's in place, so those are good. However, during that reassembly, I did make a discovery that one of my long centerpieces has a curve to it along one of the axes that's a little bit tricky. So like the outer parts of it stick down and the middle part sticks up, so it didn't sit level. So here I'm using a tool on it called Surform, which is kind of like a big long cheese grater for wood. I'm just taking a little bit of extra stuff off of it so that it'll sit flatter. This was a pain to do, and it was hard to find a good position to do it in. About the best I could do was sort of have it stood up, kind of going into my stomach to hold it there, and then feet hold it on the other end. Then I just move the thing up and down until it appears to lay flat. Gets quite a bit of wood shavings in the back of it, which I'll show in a moment. Only one piece seemed to be like that. Yeah, all that came off of that. Only one piece seemed to have that problem. Yep. But that's all fixed now. So at this point, I'm basically ready to assemble everything. I've gone ahead and put together both pads. I actually have them stacked on top of each other here, just because I don't have enough floor space to build both next to each other. If I put that thing away and moved a few things around, I probably could, but I need to get rid of this couch or something, because I just don't have that much space in here. Like, both of those will be going side by side there where that's sitting. Kind of will go all the way to that wall and over here. Yeah, space is an issue, but I'll make it work somehow. I kind of have a plan to rearrange everything in this room to make it all work. Anyway, so let's see. The wire channels that I cut are here. That's one of them. There's another one here that goes through there. So let's see, this is there it says P2, player 2 pad. So the interconnect to the player 1 pad is going to be somewhere like here. I haven't cut that. That one actually goes through the edge finish, which I haven't put onto this assembly. But yeah, there will be a hole through here, all the way out there. Then another one on the other side of the player 1 pad, which is underneath. Wait, no, I'm looking at the wrong side of this. Interconnect is here. Uh-oh. What have I done? Something doesn't seem right. Oh no, it's right. I was just looking at this wrong. Sorry. Right. So here's where the interconnect comes in. Wires go through here. There's a hole there. To the up arrow. Through here. And then again through here to the right arrow. There's another hole here. Somewhere. There, I feel it. To the left arrow. Then it continues through there. And through there. For the down arrow. So when they come in there, the LED and sensor lines for up and right arrow go this way, left and down arrow go this way. And it's kind of the opposite on the player 1 pad. The USB interface will go here, up and left arrow go that way, down and right arrow go this way. So that keeps everything out of the way of like places I'll be stepping, and it should all work just fine. Right, so my plan for assembling these, it's a little tricky. I need to drill, from this perspective, I need to drill up through the base plate into the bottoms of these, and then attach them with wood screws. I have a whole collection of screws here. This isn't even all of them, but yeah, I have quite the inventory of fasteners here. A whole bunch of these wood screws. They look like, ignore the random Wii controllers there. They look like that. So this was the flathead I was talking about. For wood, I don't need to specifically countersink because like this little conical part here can just kind of nudge its way in because wood is soft enough for that. But anyway, those, right, so I didn't talk about the shape of these. They only have threads up to a certain point. The rest of this is unthreaded. Like this part, the unthreaded part, is what's going to be going through the base plate. Then the threaded part actually attaches to all these pieces. So it kind of pulls them together and holds them nice and firm. This is the piece right here that I had to work on with the Surform to get it down a little bit. Let's see if I can... How level is this? It looks pretty level, though it's a little hard to say exactly. The player 1 pad, I think, was just level as it was. But yeah, the problem I had was that the curvature of this had this end and this end kind of lower, and then this was sort of bowed upward. But I trimmed here, trimmed the bottom here, trimmed this so it sits a lot flatter. And once the screws are installed and they're sort of pulling it downward into this, I think everything will be nice and level. Right, so you can see here, I have this numbered. I also have my sensor brackets numbered that go there. Since like these didn't go into the most precise of positions, I had to file down some of the holes differently so that everything would fit. But I made sure that I had mated pairs that would slide up and down freely for each one of these. I have numbers labeled so that I know what goes where. Yep, so 4 of those in that sort of arrangement for each of the arrow panels. And yeah, once I get that attached, then I can move on to the next stage of the project. There's always so much to do. Anyway, right, as I was saying, I'm going to assemble this frame upside down, which will look almost exactly the same, except for these will be the other way around. Then with that on the floor, just lay the base plates on top of it. Have very careful markings so I know exactly where to drill. Sit on top of the thing so that I hope that like these pieces will be held in place and won't slide around or anything. And then just drill all the holes, put all the screws in, and flip the whole thing over, and we hope it works. Because that's about the best plan I was able to come up with. The other alternative would be to assemble it like this, get everything right from the top where I can see it, and somehow have it like propped up on, I don't know, sawhorses or something so I could drill in from the bottom. But that sounds like a pain, and I don't have the equipment for that here, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to try doing it upside down and make sure it works. So yeah, this is basically the final pre-assembly video. There is a tiny bit more to do on like these pieces. I have bits of them marked that are going to have to get cut off so that they'll fit properly in these positions, but that can kind of happen anytime. Like if these pieces of wood just aren't even here, everything still works fine. They're just basically for aesthetics, or like if for some reason I want to step back here so that it has some sort of cover on it. But yeah, like oh wait, there is one more piece. I still don't have the corner stoppers that are going to go in places like this. So that needs to happen, right. Need to get workshop time for that. But that's another kind of semi-final piece that can wait. There's a lot that I can do that doesn't require those. Anyway, so hopefully next time I'll be drilling, attaching that, and actually have a fully assembled frame for both pads that lets me do the rest of the stuff to it. Should be exciting. I'll see you then.